In this very in-depth forecast, Texas is currently being monitored for severe weather, as scattered severe storms could bring the possibility of an isolated tornado and scattered large hail. Everything you need to know here on Gladiator WX. Hello everyone, welcome back to another weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for November 23rd of 2025. For today, we have a slight risk for western Texas with a marginal risk extending more so into central Texas. Risks for today include a 2% tornado risk for that slight risk region, as well as a 15% large hail risk for that slight risk region, which is the primary risk for that slight risk region for today, with more of a marginal risk for tornadoes, but we don't really have all that much of a risk for damaging wind gusts for today. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk across eastern Texas into southern Arkansas and northern Illinois there, the marginal risk extending more so into southeastern Oklahoma and into northern portions of Mississippi there. Risks for tomorrow include a 5% tornado risk for that slight risk region, with a additional tornado risk extending into um, southern Arkansas and northern Louisiana there. And then for our damaging wind gust risk, we have a 15% risk for damaging wind gusts for that slight risk region, as well as a 15% risk for large hail. For our day 3 outlook, we currently have a marginal risk for southern Tennessee into eastern Tennessee, portions of North Carolina and South Carolina there, but mostly across Georgia, Mississippi, and Alabama into portions of eastern Louisiana there, with a overall probability of a 5% risk for severe thunderstorms on Tuesday. Then for day 4, day 8 outlook, we currently have no issued areas. Taking a look at our excessive rainfall forecast for today, we do have a slight risk for western into central and into southern Oklahoma there, but also central into western Texas. And then for tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for Arkansas into Mississippi and Tennessee, northeastern Texas, and northern Louisiana there. Then for day 3 outlook, we currently have a marginal risk for Alabama, portions of Mississippi, northern Georgia, portions of South Carolina and North Carolina, and into central and eastern Tennessee. For our winter weather outlook for today, we don't really have that much of a risk for heavy snowfall in any low elevated regions. However, we do have a couple of areas across the New England states here that might see the potential of heavy snowfall that could get greater than 4 inches. But otherwise, it seems like the majority is the majority of the risk is going to be the potential for heavy snowfall into more elevated regions of the Rockies. And for tomorrow, we could see more of a risk for heavy snowfall into some concerning areas. That's not really going to be that elevated, with the risk for heavy snowfall greater than 4 inches across more low elevated regions of North Dakota and Montana there. And then for our day 3 outlook, we could see that risk for heavy snowfall extending further eastward into North Dakota, South Dakota, the northern half of Minnesota, and even into northern Wisconsin and the upper peninsula of Michigan there. Taking a look at our weather models, starting off with our 500 millibars and how this can affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. Currently, we have a low pressure system across Arizona with a trough associated with it that's currently affecting more so into extreme western Texas, right around the Big Bend region, as well as New Mexico. This is going to move eastward and affect more so into western Texas by the time storms initiate. And we're going to see quite a lot of synoptic forcing from this trough with pretty decent southwesterly flow, upwards of 50, the mid 50 to upper 50s, potentially even the mid to upper, or sorry, low to mid 60 knots. Across this region, so quite a lot of synoptic forcing, and the strong 500 millibar shear is definitely going to support quite a bit of shear across this region, and definitely support that risk for hail for today. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that's going to affect our risk for hail across this region, or our overall risk for severe thunderstorms. We do have some really nice 200 millibar flow across this region. It is definitely more so on the weaker end, but definitely pretty nice 200 millibar flow that's going to be getting upwards of 80s, potentially even the low 90s. Further down to the south, it's not really going to be as great, with the majority of the stronger 200 millibar flow being more so limited off to the north there. However, storms will definitely be able to fire within a region of some decent 200 millibar flow. which will definitely support elongated photographs and the risk for hail across this region. But however, given the fact that we aren't going to see the best 200 millibar flow further down to the south, it might be a little bit more limited on bulk shear, but I still think we're going to see quite a bit of decent bulk shear across this region. Taking a look at our 700 millibars for our low-level jet and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes for today. We'll also look at our 850 millibar jet. We have a really nice low-level jet across this region, quite a bit of decent low-level flow here at 700 millibars, with 700 millibar flow right around that 2% tornado risk, where we could see flow potentially getting upwards of the low 40 knots, potentially even into the mid and upper 40 knots in some regions around these storms. So definitely quite a bit of decent low level jet flow. Definitely going to see nice curvature in the low levels of those photographs. We can also look at our 850 millibar flow here as well. Again, really nice 850 millibar flow here as well, further off to the south, where we're going to see more of that risk for tornadoes, or more so where we need that low level jet to support that risk for tornadoes, with 850 millibar flow upwards of the upper 30s to the low 40s. So again, quite a lot of 850 millibar flow as well. Definitely going to support quite a lot of storm relative velocity and that risk for tornadoes for today. Taking a look at our storm relative velocity and how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes for today. We have a really nice shear profile across this region with quite a lot of storm relative velocity, really strong storm relative velocity, upwards of 20 or 200 to even 300, the upper 300 meters squared a second squared of storm relative velocity. But we don't really have the cape. We are kind of struggling with cape, as you can see that our partial trace does not reach all the way down to the surface, and here we do not have any surface-based cape, but we do have more elevated cape. So there is the potential for storms that are going to be further off to the north to be more elevated. So the risk for tornadoes is definitely going to be conditional on whether or not we're going to see elevated storms or surface-based storms. As further down to the south, you'll see on models we could see some greater surface-based cape, but that's why our tornado risk is so low despite having such a great shear profile, is because of the lack of surface-based instability, with our surface-based instability being very conditional, potentially more marginal, and then also limited in some areas. Taking a look at our bulk shear and how that's going to affect our risk for hail for today, we have some really great bulk shear values across this region, with bulk shear at 0 to 6 kilometer getting upwards of 70, the mid 70 knots, the mid to upper 60 knots. Quite a lot of bulk shear across this region. As you saw in those photographs previously, we have really nice elongated photographs as well. So we're definitely going to see that risk for hail. And the risk for hail isn't really dependent on a surface-based instability. We do have quite a lot of most unstable cape, with most unstable cape on just this sounding, which we'll look at later, upwards of 1,200 joules per kilogram, with really elongated photographs, with effective bulk shear upwards of 65 knots. So really nice shear profile here. Definitely going to be supportive of some large hail across this region. Taking a look at our simulated radar or composite reflectivity and how that's going to either affect or indicate our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. We are expected to see a couple of different things here. With the severe risk initially developing as a cluster of supercells that's going to move eastward, kind of spread out, and then maybe even a second round of development further off to the south there that's going to move northeastward and move into that risk for severe thunderstorms. And then later on, around 06Z, we could see much more widespread upscale growth, more messy upscale growth behind those storms across a lot of that risk for severe thunderstorms before developing into more of an MCS and moving northeastward and eastward across Texas before moving into our risk for severe thunderstorms tomorrow. So initially, our risk for tornadoes is probably going to be those first couple of storms that's going to develop across Texas, western Texas. They're going to be more isolated potentially, and overall support more of a risk for tornadoes, given the fact that they're going to be developing not only as more isolated severe thunderstorms, but also more earlier than the next round for severe thunderstorms across this region. which will allow it to tap into a much better thermodynamic profile the earlier they decide to fire. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. Storms are going to be firing initially, more so around 20Z, which I think is currently it's either 3 or 4 p.m. Maybe even 2 p.m. I'm not sure with daylight savings times. I am horrible with timing, so just bear with me here. But we are expected to see those storms develop more so in the afternoon when the sun's still up and we're still seeing the diurnal heating across this region with storms firing more so along a boundary here. You can see that wind shift where that cold front is going to be, where storms are going to initiate off of, into a really nice environment initially, with temperatures upwards of the upper 70s, potentially even into the low 80s in some regions, before tracking northeastward into a worse environment with not really a whole lot of recovery across this region compared to the last time we saw severe thunderstorms. The environment just hasn't really had a chance to recover, so we have a lot of colder temperatures across Texas, with temperatures more so into the low 60s and upper 50s, which is going to be why we're going to be struggling with surface-based instability across this region. We do not have a great surface profile at all, really, but we do have this area of temperatures that could get into the mid 60s further off to the south here. Definitely not great, but definitely supportive of some surface-based cape, which we'll look at later. However, given the fact that we're not really going to see the best surface profile anywhere where we don't see great temperatures, we're probably not going to be seeing surface-based cape, which is why our tornado risk is going to be rather limited to this region despite having such a great shear profile. But we'll also just have to wait and see how this plays out. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Again, as I was saying, the environment just hasn't really recovered since the last time we saw severe thunderstorms across this region. So the environment will definitely be struggling quite a bit with surface-based dew points upwards of the low to mid 50s across this region by the time storms actually fire. So not a lot of moisture recovery, not a lot of heat recovery either at the surface of storms moving into more so of a region of potentially more so upper 40s and low 50 dew points further off to the east here. But where we were seeing warmer temperatures, we could see a little bit warmer dew points across this region further down in the south, where that 2% tornado risk is going to be feeding from, with more so upper 50 dew points, potentially even low 60 dew points, depending on how far north this wants to stream. So again, very, very limited moisture, very limited temperatures as well. We're definitely not going to see a whole lot of surface-based instability across this region. Taking a look at our mid-level lapse rates, and then we'll look at our low-level lapse rates. We are expected to see some pretty decent lapse rates across this region, however, with lapse rates that are potentially getting upwards of the upper 6 to even the low 7s. So quite a lot of decent lapse rates, definitely going to be supportive of some instability across this region, aid with that instability, and aid with our hail risk as well. Better lapse rates also means larger hail, so we could definitely see a better risk for hail come out of this as well. Which again is why our primary risk scale, given our great shear profile, but also stronger elevated instability, but also these lapse rates that are going to be aiding with our instability, but also our hail risk in turn. Taking a look at our lapse rates for our low levels and how that's going to indicate our risk for severe thunderstorms for today. Our storms are initially going to develop in a region where we're going to see some much greater surface-based lapse rates across that region. However, they're quickly going to move out of that region as the sun begins to set, as storms will be firing quite late in the afternoon and then moving into the evening hours where we see that primary risk for severe thunderstorms after the sun sets. Into a place where we're not going to be seeing any more diurnal heating because the sun has already set. So we're going to lose those surface-based lapse rates quite quickly, which might be more of a hindrance to instability, but I doubt it will do too much to our instability. Taking a look at our instability and how this can affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today, we are going to see some decent instability across this region. The instability values are going to be getting upwards of 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 across the region for severe thunderstorms for today. Definitely more so on the lower side of things, given the fact that we don't really have the best temperatures or moisture overall. This environment just really hasn't had the time to really recover since the last time we saw severe thunderstorms. But we do have decent and sufficient most unstable cape across this region to support a hail risk. However, keep in mind a lot of this will most likely be elevated instability, not really surface based, because of the fact that we don't really have the best surface thermodynamic profile. But we do have decent lapse rates, which is going to support more elevated instability, more of an elevated risk for severe thunderstorms, which is going to be more of a hail risk overall. But then also, given the fact that we again have a great shear profile, great lapse rates, and decent instability, again, going to be more of a risk for hail than a tornado risk. Taking a look at our surface-based instability and how that's going to indicate our more marginal risk for tornadoes for today. Again, we do have some surface-based instability that might be able to stream northward associated with the little pocket of some greater surface-based thermodynamic profiles. But given the fact that we just don't really have the best thermodynamic profile overall from the surface, we're not really going to see that much surface-based instability. But again, we could see some surface-based instability that might be supportive of the risk for an isolated tornado once storms are in that region. As you can see, we are going to be struggling with our low-level jet further off this direction, further off to the west, but we do see surface-based instability, a little bit of convective inhibition, but shouldn't really tank our risk for severe thunderstorms that much. But again, we are going to be struggling when it comes to our surface-based instability, which is going to be putting quite the hindrance on our risk for tornadoes. But there is definitely not a non-zero risk for tornadoes across this region. It is just very conditional. Taking a look at our surface-based convective inhibition, how that's going to affect our risk for tornadoes or our risk for severe thunderstorms in general across this region. You can see where our convective inhibition mostly is. It likes to hang around these warmer areas where we would typically see a warm sector. However, it's not really going to span across the entirety of our risk for severe thunderstorms, mainly just further off to the west where we've had a little bit better environmental recovery. However, whenever storms move out of the region, it's going to be moving into a much weaker environment when it comes to our surface thermodynamic profile. So they're definitely going to be on the downtrend when it comes to intensity. But while they're in this low corridor here across extreme western Texas, they might be experiencing some really strong convective inhibition, which might put more of a hindrance on severe thunderstorms and really aid it, because I don't really see this lining up in a way that's going to be supportive for more explosive thunderstorm development, as our storms are also going to be firing in a region where there's not really going to be a whole lot of convective inhibition prior. There could be some convective inhibition over the next like 3 or 4 hours. However, that's going to erode quite quickly, and then there's going to be mostly a 1 to 2 hour profile when before storms fire across that region. So they're not going to be firing right when our surface convective inhibition erodes away. So we shouldn't really see too much support when it comes to explosive severe thunderstorms from our convective inhibition. If anything, it's probably going to be more of an hindrance for our risk for tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms for today, we are expected to see some decent 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, and that's definitely going to be assisting with our risk for severe thunderstorms. That initial round of severe thunderstorms, we could see some great surface-based instability here, 0 to 3 kilometer instability, instability that will definitely aid with our risk for severe thunderstorms within the first couple of hours after storms develop before they move eastward into a weaker environment. And then for that second round of severe thunderstorms, we do have a little bit of a pocket of some pretty decent 0 to 3 kilometer instability develop here. We can click on it and pull a sounding. This is going to be ahead of storms. We do have some decent-ish surface-based cape. not really the best shear profile, given the fact that we're going to see a little bit weaker, a little bit of a weaker low level jet further off to the west. So we don't have the greatest low level directional shear profile, but really elongated hodographs definitely going to be supportive of a risk for severe thunderstorms, but mainly a hail risk across this region. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that's going to indicate our risk for tornadoes for today. Again, as I was saying, our tornado risk is probably going to be associated with that first round of severe thunderstorms across western Texas initially, where we do have some weaker energy helicity index values further off in that region, where we're going to be seeing a little bit better environmental recovery. Still not the best environmental recovery. It is going to be, again, rather weak surface profile here with upper 60 temperatures and low 60 dew points, with a little bit of convective inhibition across that region. There may be even an elevated mix layer as well, so quite the hindrance. But if that cap can break, we can definitely see the possibility of tornadoes across this region. And you can see that shear profile, as I was talking about, really decent curvature in the low levels of the hodograph there, with 255 effective inflow layer of storm relative felicity there, and then also effective shear. When it comes to our halo risk as well, we have really elongated tails of our hodograph here, definitely going to support that risk for hail. You can see our shear profile here as well, definitely going to see some classic supercells across this region, especially given our low level shear profile. And then for our effective shear, you can also see 60 knots worth of effective shear across this region. So again, really nice shear, going to be supportive of that risk for tornadoes across this region. However, again, convective inhibition might be a hindrance, but in some regions we could see some surface-based instability that might support that risk for tornadoes. But again, it's all conditional because we have so many factors at play that could be more of a hindrance to our risk for tornadoes. Again, given our convective inhibition being more of a hindrance to our overall storm threat, as well as our risk for tornadoes, but then also the fact that we just don't really have the best surface profile. And then again, the lack of surface instability across this region. Again, very conditional risk for tornadoes across this region, but it's not a non-zero threat. Taking a look at our wind gusts here and how that's going to affect our risk for damaging wind gusts across this region. Again, currently we don't really have any risk for damaging wind gusts across this region, at least that the SPC has noted. However, I am noticing that some storms are producing some damaging wind gusts upwards of 40 miles per hour in some regions. And then overall widespread, we could see some damaging wind gusts associated with storms upwards of the upper 30 miles per hour. I definitely think that there is the chance that they could upgrade our damaging wind gust risk to a 5% risk for damaging wind gusts across this region, but currently they have not, because it's pretty early in the morning, but it might come around by the 1630Z outlook. So just watch out for that. I do think there is the potential for a risk for isolated damaging wind gusts on top of our hail and tornado risk, but the primary risk for today is going to be our hail risk. Taking a look at our hail swath models on College of DuPage and how that's going to indicate a risk for large hail for today. Again, we have quite the risk for large hail for today across this region, with quite a lot of hail swath, very widespread hail swath regions here, with hail sizes that could potentially get upwards of an inch, maybe 1.2 inches in diameter. So again, really big risk for hail for today. Definitely not a huge risk. I mean that more so just relatively. We do have a bigger risk for hail compared to our other risk for severe thunderstorms. Again, the primary risk is going to be the risk for hail, and we could definitely see quite a bit of widespread hail across this region associated with our severe thunderstorms. Now that I told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for GladiatorWX and join the Discord for any updates on GladiatorWX. And hopefully I'll see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.